book that I found on my Kindle called Does God Exist? I don't know the exact author of this book. Let me just see if I know the author. I don't know this church. Again, I'm not saying I support this church or not, but it says copyright 2013, the Philadelphia Church of God. So I don't know anything about the Church of God. It says by Herbert W. Armstrong. I don't know anything about the author, but I started reading this last night. It's a really short, like 18-page book, like ebook you can get on the Kindle, but I'm just going to read a little bit of it because I thought it would be very interesting to do so. So we're going to just start with the second part of it. It says, don't assume no. Many of these, however, especially among more or less religious individuals, have merely assumed the existence of God. Why? Simply because they were taught it from childhood, which is true. A lot of people grow up in Christian homes. It has been believed in the circles in which they have lived or associated, but few of these have proved it. Of course, on the other hand, perhaps the vast majority who accept evolution, at least passively, were simply swept into that acceptance in college or university. And then they said it became the scholarly in thing. It's very in. The opposite belief, special creation, has not been widely taught. It has not been objectively examined. Too frequently, proponents utilize the psychological ploy that it is a badge of scholarly status to accept evolution and a stamp of ignorance or intellectual inferiority to doubt the hypothesis. All of which goes to show that people in general believe what they do simply because they have been taught it or because it has been accepted in their particular social environment. People want to belong and they want to go along with their particular group. In general, they believe what they have been, I should reread that. In general, they have believe, I think they might have made a mistake. In general, they believe what, no, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. In general, they believe what they have taken carelessly for granted without examination or proof. Of course, I know well, too, that people generally believe only what they're willing to accept, which is true. A lot of times, unfortunately, that is a thing. Now, I wanted to read a little bit from another section here. Creation without a creator. Yeah, so before I actually read that, I'm going to write which God. I'm going to read about which God. So, which God? He talks about which God. So, it says, an atheist wrote me, we have the history of many religions and many gods. Which one of these gods do you claim for your God, and how do you know that he exists? That's a fair question. It deserves an answer. Yes, my friend, I have a God. The gods of some nations have been carved by men's hands out of wood, stone, or other existing materials. The God of some religions and individuals have been carved out of human imaginations and faulty human reasoning. Some have worshipped the sun or other inanimate objects of nature. All these gods are merely the created, most of them formed and fashioned by man, therefore inferior to man, which is true because a lot of gods, if you look at the history of just how Zeus or any of the other Greek gods, and for example, a lot of them were just built. So if you ever look up the True Christian Ministry podcast, look up True Christian Ministry. Mike Pagano from True Christian Ministry went to Ephesus, and there's a lot of Greek mythology, and all of where Paul taught was right by Greek statues. There's so many Greek statues, guys, where Paul was preaching, and literally he's just preaching around Greek statues, and a lot of that was just made by human hands. Now he says, but he who did the creating, he who brought everything that exists into existence, including all else falsely called God, he who created all matter, force, and energy, who created all natural laws and set them in motion, who created life and endowed some of it with intelligence, he is God. He is superior to all else that is called God. He alone is God. And then he says creation is the proof of God, which you go check out my videos I put up today at the beach. Go check them out because there's definitely some proof of God's existence there. Now let's read creation without a creator. So he says the theory of evolution provided by the atheist an explanation of a creation without a creator. Now, this is not me saying that I don't think evolution wasn't a way that God could have created. I'm not denying that that could have been a possibility. But again, the atheist, unfortunately, and if you're an atheist, I want to represent you properly. But a lot of times the atheist will use that as almost like a cop-out for God's existence. Like, well, evolution is the reason why we were created. There's no need for a God because this evolutionary process happened. So that's what he's talking about here. But this misguided rationalism failed utterly to account for the origins of things and of life. And today, the more candid among geologists and biologists confess that they do not know how life could have evolved from inanimate matter through the simple life forms to the complex, interdependent species we see about us. Finally, to man, Lamarck's theory of use and disuse, Darwin's natural selection, and other theories have now fallen by the wayside, and mutations explain only the presence of varieties less fit to survive. And then he talks about how matter always existed, but there's another part here I'm going to read. So we're going to skip over. I'm reading some of this. I can link it in the description if I can find it, if you want to read this whole thing for yourself. So he says, when matter did not exist, the radioactive elements in existence today have not yet been in existence long enough to have run their course and disintegrate into lead, to have always existed without any definitive time or definite time of starting in the past. This life period of radioactive elements long ago would have run its course. All radioactive elements would have sorry, I think I might have missed my page. That's so annoying. Would have long ago disintegrated into lead, since these elements exist only for a definitive span of years. And all the uranium, radium, thorium, and other radioactive elements in the world today have not yet existed that many years. There was a time prior to the duration of this span in the past where these elements did not exist. Here we have a definitive scientific proof that matter has not always existed. Here we have definite specific elements that once in the long ago did not yet exist. Then there came a time later when these elements came into existence. So I think he's trying to showcase how things have always, things that not have always existed, and that there had to have been a creator, because I think people think, oh, this always existed and then eventually just expanded. I believe, again, I'm not, too, knowledgeable with that, but I think that's what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, well, these things didn't always exist. There was an existing point which would have made a God possible to have created these things. And then if we go down, I'm going to skip a little bit. Okay, here we go. So he says at the very end, there is a cause for every effect. And in accepting that inevitable fact proved by the findings of science of the existence of the great first cause, you have to accept the fact of the existence and pre-existence of the creator God. And then if we go down here, I think I might have more, yeah. Okay, so he talks about who, is the creator, who created everything. And then he goes to say, but there remains one thing no man has ever been able to do. He cannot build, make, produce, or create anything that is superior to himself. A man can take existing materials and out of them build a house. An automobile is almost a living thing, but the intelligence and powers required to invent and produce it are superior to the things produced. Now let me ask you candidly, do you honestly believe that any power or force of less intelligence than your mind produced you? If you do not believe in my God, then you have only the alternative of believing that something less than your intelligence produced you. That dumb, purposeless unintelligence brought into being your intelligence. The only rational possibility is to acknowledge that the very presence of the human mind is proof that the great first cause is also the supreme intelligence, infinitely superior to the abilities of mortal man. No man with all his ingenuity and science and laboratory facilities can produce food. That is, he cannot take plain inorganic matter and turn it into a living substance we call food. But some power, force, intelligence, or being did in some way at some time start the process, going a process far too wonderful for any man to devise or produce. And so it is that out of the ground grows grass, and the green leafy vegetables, and all the other vegetables and vines and trees yielding fruit, each with its seed in itself, each throughout this seed, reproducing after its kind, and it was very good. When a marvelous little grain of wheat is planted in the ground, a plant develops and sprouts above the ground, and in some matter too wonderful for any human mind to understand or imitate, these elements drunk in through the roots from the ground are utilized by the life germ in the seed of wheat, and the new grains of wheat appear. When we eat animal meat, we are merely consuming secondhand the vegetation that the animal ate. Man, with all his volant science, his technological laboratory facilities, with all his inventive genius, lacks the intelligence and the powers to produce a grain of wheat or to convert inorganic matter into living food. Then it is rational to say that forces or powers exist of no intelligence which have been able to produce this living miracle of food. Did not a far greater intelligence than man design, create, and supply man with all of this? Every bit of God's perfection man's hand has ever touched it. It would seem he has besmirched, spoiled, and polluted. Okay, sorry guys. He has besmirched, spoiled, and polluted. I'm so sorry. Okay, and then at the end here, and these foodless foods which man has tampered in lust for profit have produced in human bodies a whole series of disease of which our forefathers a few generations ago never had or never heard. So yeah, again, and this is going back to God's existence, because people will say, oh, well, if God is so good, why did all these bad things happen to our foods and X, Y, and Z? Humans have put really disgusting things in food. From America, we have really bad stuff in food. I know that they're trying to bring back cane sugar and Coke. I just heard that, which is good. I'm all for that. But why do we have all these problems like diabetes in America? Diet Coke, for example, has aspartame and all these gross things inside of it. And it doesn't have cane sugar. So no wonder why we're having all these disgusting things. People just want money. So they make it cheap, and they make products really cheap and make food cheap because they want to sell mass-produced chips and mass-produced dip. If you get Cheese Whiz dip, it's all mass-produced with chemicals. Just through a machine of like squeezed out cheese. It's just gross. It's not real cheese. It may have came from a cow eventually, but that never happened. When you got it, by the time you got it, it was all tampered with. And that's why we see a lot of disease. So you can't blame a God on disease. You just can't. Now, he talks about the cause of diseases. And then he says, then too, the God who created this earth and all vegetation told us to let our land idle every 7th year. But man is too greedy to do that, which is true. If you read the Old Testament, he gave them a Sabbath year. So the Sabbath day is on the 7th day. But then he would give them a Sabbath year, which is every 7 years. And so our land is worn out, depleted, and such natural good foods as carrots, beets, and turnips are lacking in the necessary mineral elements and vitamins. And drug companies get rich selling vitamin pills, which is true. Look into the drug industry. It's just another way to make money. There's a whole system. Even going to doctors, unfortunately, they do want to pump me with medicine. Which intelligence is higher than that of the God who produced every perfect need for every living thing, or that of greedy, gullible God rejecting humans who, in the interest of bigger profits and more luxuries for themselves, have robbed the very good foods God created and gave us of their health and bodybuilding values, which is true. I'm sorry, but like, what did King Hezekiah, they told King Hezekiah that we're going to fix you with your boil with fig paste. Nowadays, you're going to go and get this like chemicalized ointment to get rid of boils and pimples. Back then, you just took figs and pasted it on there, and it worked, and it was natural. And then I'm just going to read, I think, the last one I want to read here. Up there in the heavens is the great master clock that never makes a mistake, is always on time, never off a fraction of a second, the heavenly bodies coursing through the skies. If you can look about you and observe how intelligent, planned, and executed everything in nature and in plant and animal life, everything we see except the bulging, botching, polluting of God's beautiful handiwork by the clumsy hands of God, ignoring and rejecting man. And then you say you doubt the existence of an all-wise, all-knowing, all-powerful creator, then I do not have much faith either in your rational processes or your sincerity as a seeker of the truth. Now, again, I really liked this little thing. I can try to give it to you guys in the description. But I just wanted to say, guys, that I really want to read that because I really thought it was important for you guys to hear that. If you're an atheist, definitely check this out and really let it sink in. And I just hope that you guys enjoyed listening to this. Thank you for the people who have joined me. I'm not trying to exit this live, so hopefully I can. This is a YouTube live, and I've never done it. And I know I don't have the comments. Like, I want to comment usually doing the podcast. I normally do, but for this, I just want to turn the comments off so there was no debating. But you guys kind of just understand what I'm saying. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll link it down below if I can. And if not, definitely look it up. And peace be with you. Have a great day, guys.